started was because the emergency manager wanted to condemn, get rid of the whole structure. But they signed a deal 30 years ago that said that whoever owned those two towers on the side would have perpetual parking.
And inspiring to me to build new things and make new ideas.
I'm trying to open one up at Cloud 22 Glassworks, 22 North Saginaw. Until recently, we were going to be okay to try to apply, but Hidden River Park has now become a Kaboom grant nominee, or regardless, they're going to be getting some money for it. And it's hard to say that a park for kids isn't a good idea. I mean, come on, I have kids. But however, I do not want my kids playing anywhere near that park. That park is not the right place for what the city is trying to put there. It's across the street from these potentially wonderful bistro lights, across the street from my reputable pawn shop. There's a beer and wine store on the corner, and my head shop. It's just not the right vision that I have seen for this downtown. I'm going on 20 years down here, guys. I know I look very young. I have been down here for quite some time. And I hate for the downtown to miss the boat with this cannabis initiative. We're doing everything right. There are going to be amazing dispensaries. We had to fight hard to get them in downtown. And now with this park, I call it an area between two buildings that a lot of homeless people like to hang out in, is not the right spot.
It's nice to listen to everyone with what we're doing, we're taking it and listening, because there's a lot of different talks going on. There has been a lot of different talks going on. You know, Hidden River Park has been the source of a lot of projects going on. In fact, the neighborhood empowerment projects, I think we got quite a bit of money over the last 2 years to do redesign
10,000.
in that space.
We did 10,000.
And Jim and Monica happen to know a lot about it because they actually brought the idea to us, and we're partners in the grant, we're consultants on that particular grant. So, and I think your idea is well taken because it is multi-purpose. This isn't just, we got 28 parks in the city of Pontiac. Some of them are playground, exclusively playground parks. This is part of a greater idea of developing CNU and all the others that downtown need to have green space. We need to have green space. So, which is how you develop the green space. And I think one of the things you brought in was to have a
Shipping container.
to have a performance.
Yeah, shipping container that acts as a stage.
It's not a exclusive.
This is your facility, and you can take and do with it what you want, but we don't have to lose it. Now, one of the things that we talked about at the town hall was many people who are leaders that you recognize who also remember what a jewel this is and why we should maintain it. And I'm going to quote a couple of people who are here right now, including I see on this document that I bring for you. I'm not showing any videos, but I'm showing this document that was presented last year talking about the Phoenix Center and Ottawa Towers. And we have here Council President, who says, and I quote him, this is his picture right here, "I have fond memories of events at the Phoenix Center with my family and feel strongly that we must save this jewel of our community." I have here also, I see Mark Collins here in our audience. He was a council person, I guess, when he was quoted. And this is his picture, and he was quoted as saying, "This Phoenix Center was built to provide parking for downtown businesses, and it has a large recreational space with an attractive amphitheater. Its future could one day include community events like concerts, once again playing at the amphitheater, attracting thousands of people to downtown." So that's the image that we want to bring back. And at the presentation, the project managers talked about the timeline that we must move on in order to meet the terms of the settlement. If we don't meet these deadlines, and that's encroaching upon us, then we go back to court. Then it's possible that we lose it, and we don't get rid of the damages that the Ottawa Tower sued us for. We end up paying for that anyway.
If we take a look at the status, our settlement agreement has been signed by the mayor and city council regarding funding, that we are projecting approximately 8-month delay in the availability of funds from, say, them being available at the very onset of the project. The program manager, construction manager, we are under contract. Okay, and the phase that we're at right now is issuing the RFP for the architects to prepare their pricing. So with that, the process will be issuing the RFP, reviewing the RFP with the city DPW director, and then making a recommendation for city council approval. And then again, we have indicated where we are as far as the status of that. Once we have approval from city council, then the design and cost estimating, and then ultimately the bid and trade award of the trade work will commence. So we're looking at that getting started about, say, 3 months late. And then once it's been approved, funding is in place, then we can start the construction. Construction will start approximately 3.5 months late, because what we have done is added a 2-week period for completing a schematic estimate and allowing the approval of the actual scope of the work to be determined by the city. That would include the settlement agreement work, along with any other activities that the city may require or request be performed at that time. Okay. Here, we have the detailed schedule for the process. And what we've indicated and broken it down to show that with the architect's proposals being due on November 22nd, and allowing opportunities for the review of those proposals, the preparation of, say, having interviews so that those firms can present, and then make the recommendations for award on December 12th, that then would be presented for city council action, approval of that contract on the 12th of December. Once that commences, the architects engineers will know that they need to get started immediately. So starting on December 18th, they'll start their investigative work. They will use the reports that have already been generated and commissioned by the city, along with their site observations, to get the information necessary to start preparing their design documents. That initial phase of designs, called schematic design, will occur between December 18th and the 7th of February. At the 7th of February, we will then estimate the scope of that work so that we'll know what the probable cost is for the work specifically required by the settlement agreement, and again, along with any other work that would help maybe reduce the maintenance costs, would also help make sure that the garage, the facility, can have its expected life cycle. And once again, those will all be separated so that decisions can be made on the actual scope of work that would be performed. So the idea would be is the estimate would be prepared between the 10th of February and the 21st of February, and then presented for recommendations on the actual scope. Once that's approved, then the design will continue, and it will go through a phase called design development. We'll make sure that that project stays on budget, that there's no changes in the scope, that ultimately will result in bidding documents being available on April 17th. So at April 17th, what we would need in order to go out for the trade bids is to know that the financing would be available to pay for that scope of work. Now, right now, the best information that we have is the IDS report of October 2nd, 2018, that indicates approximately $16.5 million being required for the work of the Phoenix Center. Our goal will be then, is in February, to be able to complete an estimate based on the scope of the work to find out actually what is that amount. That 16.5 is a high-level estimate. It's based on a complete scope of renovating the Phoenix Center facility in its entirety. What we will be doing is creating an estimate that's based on the priorities of the city. And then once again, so that the actual scope of the work will be determined at that time and what the actual cost is. But some of the things to consider is the fact that electrical will have to be replaced in that building, and the current estimate, even in the IDS study, is approximately $6 million. And also with the elevators, that's over $1 million. That we know just those two items alone, are going to be between, say, $5.5 and $6.5 million. So with that, we're just asking that we stay on a timeline for financing so that we know we can go out for bids. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vince. Questions, Councilman Williams.
Good evening.
And turn your microphone on.
It's
still on. You hit it twice. There you go.
My concern is, when will the council receive the scope of work?
Okay, the scope of work will be defined with the schematic design, which will be prepared by the AEs and say issued. That would be on February 7th. And so right now we have a very broad scope of work is identified in the settlement agreement and then the IDS reports. And the information that will be available on February 7th will be very detailed so we can see exactly what is being proposed to be completed, and it will also be identified, is it directly related to the settlement agreement, or if it's those activities that will help enhance or reduce the maintenance costs over time, and then maximize the life cycle of the facility.
So what you're telling me is that the actual scope of work was by some other reports from previous administrations?
The IDS report was issued on October 2nd of 2018.
This administration.
I'm not sure where that coincides with administrations.
That was last year. That's this administration.
Okay.
So the IDS report was prepared in 2018, so it was under this current administration as part of the settlement agreement, just prior to the settlement agreement being drafted and signed. So everyone has, maybe you probably don't have it since you're just coming back onto council. So the other council has seen it. It's been around for a while.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Actually, we can supply that to you. We can get you a copy of that.
Thank you.
Councilman Waterman.
My question, I guess, will be directed to the executive and not so much to you, Mr. In our settlement agreement, we came up with 3 proposals. Where are those RFPs?
Okay, so council did ask for 2 other RFPs to be done for public-private partnership as well as for lease, and those were to run concurrently with the issuance of the process for the bonds, according to the agreement. So our financial advisor is preparing those RFPs. He's a little delayed in getting it done, so we expect to have that. In fact, we were promised it a week and a half or so ago, but we are still working on getting that, and at that time, we'll have all those on the agenda at the same time so that we can do those concurrently.
So
we're doing that. But what Mr. De Leonardis is saying, and I just want to make sure we know the bottom line, is that he was hired by the council who signed the settlement agreement to proceed so we could fulfill the terms of the settlement agreement. So he is doing his part, even though, he knows we're behind because we've held him up. But his part of it says that he will go ahead and get the right people in place to do so we can move on. So he is saying that the RFPs for the architectural engineer design will be issued soon as possible, so that they can get them on board and try to make up some of this time. That's his job, to make sure we do the construction and get into the various phases. It's council's job to decide how that's going to be financed. So that's why it's important for us to move along with that decision.
Yeah, I just want to make 2 points of clarity. When I asked for those RFPs, it was the administration that wanted them to run concurrently in that closed session. That was not a contingency of asking for the RFP for the public-private partnership. And also, when OC was brought on, we had huge concerns about the financing and if the people wanted to do bonds. And so we made a contingency that OC would get paid even if the rest of the project didn't continue. Now, I know they want to continue, and they've been working very diligently in order to do that. The problem is, if we proceed with the architectural designs, this is based on the bond financing. If you can go back to 2 slides, which is the project schedule.
So they mixed it in there.
So if you look at the very bottom 2 lines on the big part, it says funds available for pre-construction, $1.5 to $2 million. Then the second little slide says advertise for up to $19 million bond sale. The reason that the other RFPs are important is because we haven't even started that timeline that we asked for in 2 months.
Right.
They quoted us that the scope of work would be easy to do, so they could have it to us by next week. That never happened. There was never a scope of work that continued with that. And so for me to hear today that this is the 6th or 7th Phoenix Center presentation. And the RFP for public-private partnership or for the lease or sale is very important. If we're going to sell or lease the Phoenix Center, then how we pay for these costs and what we pay for has to be negotiated with that leasing. You can't do that if you don't put out an RFP. And so I understand where Vince is coming from, because he's just been hired to do a scope of work, and that's what he's presenting. But I want the people in TV land to know that if we approve this RFP for the architectural design, it's based on the assumption that this building is going to cost $16.5 million. So I just want to be clear on that. And so that's a different pot of money. And so my question to you, Mr. De Leonardis, is how will the architects be paid if we don't bond?
Okay. But we have asked for a commitment from the city that the funds would be available to pay the architectural fees that we are saying we won't know until the proposals come in, but based on the scope of the work, the size of the building, would run between $1.5 and $2 million.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? Attorney Sharp?
I was just going to say, Council President, that what you said was correct. Initially, the council and the administration had a discussion about the RFPs running concurrent with the notice of intent. However, the resolutions that you passed did not contain the notice of intent to issue bonds to go with the RFPs.
May I just say?
Madam Mayor?
Yes. For one thing, and the attorney will help me with this, but generally closed sessions are not supposed to be, those are things that are not supposed to be discussed. But since you've already broached that, and it was, sometimes things are a gentleman's agreement. We go on the good faith of the people who are in the room. And so everybody who was there, the financial advisors and everybody, did hear the word concurrently used repeatedly, and that is how they're proceeding. But we will, if I have to write on myself, I guess, we will get these RFPs to you, because as you've heard from Mr. DeLeonardis, he's running so far behind now that he has told us that the cost for this get exponentially higher the more you have to rush them along. Anybody who knows construction knows that. So we don't want to waste taxpayers' money on things that we can avoid by having that. The council has considered this since November 1st. When we originally presented the settlement agreement at that time, it was also done with the fact that the cities most likely do these kinds of things with bonds. It's in the minutes, it's in the notes for whatever we presented at the time in the transcript. So this is not something new, and here now we're 11 months later. So we do have to move along, or we risk, as Mr. DeLeonardis has said to you repeatedly, we risk default. I don't think anybody here wants to run default of a settlement agreement that you have, council, signed the goodwill and faith of the city on. I don't want to even think about what happens if we default upon this settlement agreement.
Council President?
Yes.
If I may, just to bring to your attention again, the notice of intent to issue bonds, council would have had to sign that. So therefore, that's not anything that's privileged, because if in fact council agreed to it, you would have had to sign it, and it had to be published. So that's nothing that is unprivileged.
No, I was saying the closed session. What
I'm
happened?
not referring to closed session, I'm referring to what council passed, the resolutions for the RFPs, and the notice of intent was not along with it.
Talking about two different things, Ms. Sharp. I'm talking about the closed session.
Excuse me, I just want to bring some clarity to all of this.
Yeah.
After the closed session, we voted individually on the RFPs because I could not speak for the entire council.
Right.
That's why we had an open meeting, and I had, matter of fact, we started off with the complete sale of the Phoenix Center as one of the options, which got voted down. So what I'm saying is, once it was brought for an actual vote of the council, it was no longer privileged information because we voted on those things. So I just want people try to have closed sessions to keep us from giving the facts to the people. What I'm saying to you is
That's ridiculous.
that's what you're just basically doing right now. I'm just telling you what was factual, what we voted on, and so to try to, never mind, I won't even go there today.
Yeah.
What I just want to say is that there were proposals. We are yet to get the RFPs that we voted on, yet and still this council is asked to vote on another RFP. So, thank you.
Can I have,
Yeah, go
I just
ahead.
have one comment, Mr. President. You know, I have a big problem when you're milking the citizen and their money. All this is all good and said, but to allow this to continue, and I wrote down $1.5 to $2 million for this, that's not fair to the taxpayers. We need to do what we're gonna do on this project and do what, that's just me, I can't speak for everyone else, but we're just spending money that we don't have. And maybe for something that you may not even get, because myself, publicly, I'm gonna say publicly, for all my constituents, I'm not voting for no bonds for you. I'm not doing that to you. That's just me. I live here too, I'm not gonna do that. So that's just me. So let's just say this thing doesn't even work. We just spent all this 1.2 or 1.5 to $2 million that I know I can use in my district that we're wasting. And that's all I got to say. This is such a waste of money.
Okay, Pro Tem Carter, then Councilwoman Peeler.
Okay, I understand Vince's dilemma, I understand that, and we agree to that. What the public might not get is that we had many reports. We had a Desmond report, we had a screwed up Desmond report through the EM. We had an Eagle report. I recognize them. I understand about expansion joints, I understand about all the plumbing that exploded. We probably talking about a pedestrian and a freight elevator. I think there's only two in the garage area. I understand that. What I do not understand is what it costs within those reports to repair the Phoenix. Not this blue light stuff and all that other BS stuff that everybody's looking at. That's not included. We're talking about paying the lawsuit off, making sure that that Ottawa Towers get their 2,000 parking places. That leaves us 800 when they fully fill their building, according to their information. So literally, we got a screwed up lawsuit. It's ridiculous that they get to have it for 10 years and we do not get to use it. We just get pumped to pay for it. That's what I want everybody to know. There's no pretty lights, there's no nothing, we just got to fix all the structure. I think we have to make it handicap accessible. It never was for them. So there's no benefit for us or the city. I don't want to see the little pretty lights. I want to see the little skateboard ramp. It ain't got nothing to do with this. I just wonder what the bottom line is. Expansion joints, getting the concrete and re-rod fixed, back under tension. What does it take, and where is the estimation for the lights for the other side? I have not seen that either. I'm sure in February that'll come out in this.
Want to speak to that?
Absolutely. In the design, it will be comprehensive, but then once again, it will be identified which activities are required specifically for the settlement agreement and those other two categories.
Because
in addition,
I have read all the reports, and including the ISD, and yes, I did have a favorite, which was the Eagle report, and it mentioned a lot of things, even the Desmond, that these things did not have to be done immediately. I understand that. I know within this lawsuit, whatever this lawsuit was, and I was going to say whatever this lawsuit was, because it's no advantage to winning something that you don't get anything out of. You can't even call it a win. You just call it a screw, literally. So I guess before February, maybe through John, can I have the information before, I know what you're going to work on, about what really needs to be repaired. I know, you would know. If I had my laptop,
I believe we presented what needs to be repaired based on the settlement agreement. I mean, I could go through line by line in the settlement agreement, and it shows exactly what needs to be repaired, and that's where we're coming up with the $16.5 million. $6 million in lighting alone, electrical, lighting, structural. There are broken cables in that garage today as it sits there. Those are expensive. Elevators, we're at $1 million in elevators.
And what does it cost to light the other side?
What do you mean, like
the north side did not have lighting?
Well, currently the garage, that's the south side, is being lit by Ottawa Towers. We pay them monthly for that. We have to install a whole new electrical system in the entire building because there is no electrical left. The rooms where the electrical comes into the building from DTE, they don't exist anymore. The switchgear are gone. There's nothing left.
Okay, so based on that, did the Ottawa Towers give us a date when they gotta turn our lights off?
Well, the settlement agreement expires on November 1st of 2020. So probably either around there or before. Okay. When they see we're not doing anything, that's when it'll happen.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilwoman Peeler?
Here is
John, step on back, please. Anthony, please step on. Tony, come on up. When this came to us, where we had to enter into a settlement, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want both of you there. Didn't this council, with the exception of Councilman Williams and Councilwoman Miller, agree to bond, to purchase the bond so we could get this moving because Judge Rosen gave us a deadline?
Councilwoman Peter, I don't believe that the bonding or the issuance of the bonding was part of the resolution, but obviously the obligation to pay, which was estimated based upon the IDS report, which was commissioned to be consistent with the terms of the settlement agreement at $16.5 million, was conducted and was provided to this council before it approved that settlement. And so it was aware of that number and that figure, and obviously the fact that we don't have that in the general fund to pay without triggering review of the state for potential takeover, obviously.
And the bonds that we are talking about now are not bonds that would be put on the homeowner's taxes or the property owner's taxes?
Yeah,
They are bonds that would be paid out of the general fund, is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good question, Councilwoman Peterla, because what Vince has prepared tonight is we are under an obligation as the executive staff to continue to ensure that we can comply or be as close to compliance with the settlement agreement in any way that we can. We need to hire an architect and engineering firm now, and because we haven't issued the notice of potential bonding, we aren't going to be able to pay for them with the bond money, so it's going to have to come out of the general fund. That's $1.5 to $2 million. That could be 10% of our surplus would be used to hire them. Alternatively, we can go to the market, we get the bonds, and the payback of the bonds is structured over time so that it will be paid for in a balanced budget and therefore will not have any impact on our surplus, and our surplus can continue to grow. I think all the citizens, if they understand that, and I think they do, I think that's why in polls they have repeatedly shown that's the route they want to go for. And when you think about it in that way, it's very understandable that we could use that surplus for a lot of other purposes that we know the citizens need and want.
Right.
Thank you. Attorney Chubb, in your professional opinion, would you ever issue a survey that gave out raffle tickets to a concert as scientific data? And would you consider less than 400 people representative of the citizens of Pontiac, in your professional opinion? Would you bank on that?
I don't have a professional opinion on surveys.
So what I'm saying is you just quoted the survey as if it was gospel. I just want to make sure that you would use that survey to make the decisions in your life on $19 million. You would use 400 people that wanted to go to a Raheem Devine concert.
Those were the people that responded. I don't know what the basis for that was.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Councilman Williams.
And you mentioned $6 million for electrical only?
Approximately. That's an estimate based on the IDS report.
What part of that $6 million is for the Edison power coming into the substation, that structure?
I believe when the original vandalization was done, that was about $327,000 for just to bring the power back into the building, and then we would have to provide all the switch gear to change the power to where we need it to be.
Okay, thank you. It's just amazing to me that you can get in a building and still 13.2 volts and the switch gears and nobody see nothing.
Do it at night.
That's amazing.
Do that at night.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? All right, we're going to move on to item number 6.